Welcome to another edition of The Conversation here at the Dakotan. I am Jonathan Starr. Today we have a fun interview that I've been looking forward to for a while, and that is with current U.S. Senator Kevin Cramer. Thank you for joining us today, Senator.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure, Jonathan. And I do feel a little extra pressure when you say it's a fun interview before it started, but I'll do my best.
Well, you know what? It's going to be a great time. I'm looking forward to a bunch of controversy. I'm looking forward to,
Ah,
no, I'm kidding. We
I'm your
will
man.
we will avoid all that stuff. So we get to see you as the senator, and obviously you were in the House before that and been involved in that high level of politics for a while. But let's turn back the clock a good 30 years and
Okay.
let's go back to the end of the 80s and the early 90s when there's a young Kevin Cramer. Why was the interest in politics so strong all the way back then?
Yeah, it's a great question because I feel like I'm still a young Kevin Kramer, other than in my knees. But
Yeah.
back in the 90s, well, going a little further back than that, I graduated from college at Concordia College in 1983,
Okay.
graduated from high school at Kindred High School in 1979. I set out to go to Concordia to be a pastor.
Oh,
And yeah, I know it's a shocker. A lot of people are scratching their heads.
yes.
Um, but I took, Latin and Greek and theology classes, and my major was social work. Um, but even prior to Concordia, so I really decided about in eighth grade. I felt the call to a vocation of ministry, and I loved church. I loved confirmation at Kindred Lutheran Church. My mom was very active in the church. She was a city councilwoman, which I think
Okay.
is important.
Right.
My dad was a union steward for the local IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, because he was a lineman for Cass County Electric. So I have this in my roots. But when you
Right.
go way back, Jonathan,
Yeah.
go back like 15 generations, my 10th great grandfather was the governor of Plymouth Colony for like 26 years. William Bradford is my 10th great grandfather. So,
Wow.
unbeknownst to me, for most of my life, the vast majority of my life, really right up until a couple of years ago, I didn't know I had this sort of bloodline
Yeah.
going all the way back to the Pilgrims. I had another 11th great grandparents on the Mayflower as well. But um, but I what I learned in high school and what I learned in college is that many of the same skills that are suitable for work as a pastor, particularly in the pulpit, probably
Right.
persuasive skills, the ability to tell a story, make a point with in an illustration,
Yeah.
um, study the details, and then be able to explain it at various levels. Really, were suitable for politics. I was on the student council my sophomore, junior, and senior years. I was
Okay.
the president of my school class. So this had always this sort of public service, um, you know, bug was always in my I think in my bloodline, quite honestly.
You
But
could
in the
never get away
90s,
from it.
you really can't, right? And I think for self-governed people, it shouldn't ever get away from you, and you should never get away from it, because the self-governed part of us is what calls on all of us to be part of the leadership, if you will, of our own country. It's what's unique about the United States. A lot of people bristle, and understandably, when somebody says, "Well, we're a democracy." Well, we are,
Right.
but there were lots of democracies,
Yeah.
but we're the first one, and really still, Jonathan, the only one that's what I consider truly self-governed. Okay, so that means we always, when we look in the mirror, we're looking at our own leader in many respects. Um, but when I was in the state party, you're working for the North Dakota Republican Party, coming up on about 1990. I became executive director in 1990. Republicans just lost all the time. I mean,
Right.
we had lost, every race. We had a governor from 1980 through 84, lost that race, lost our only senator in 1986, just kept losing until 1992. I was the young party chairman at the time. Had been
Okay.
executive director, was elected chairman, really was sort of drafted into this job as chairman of the Republican Party. And it always seemed to me that we were neither aggressive enough, We didn't articulate clearly enough. We didn't know how to work with the media. I rather like working with the media. Probably not no surprise to you. And I started this sort of loyal opposition thing of mine where I was pretty good with one-liners.
Right.
wasn't afraid to swing hard, um, and I think I was pretty successful. But the thing that made me the most successful was my timing,
Okay.
because in 1992, Ed Schaefer ran for governor against impossible odds, both as in the primary or the convention and in the general election, and he won. He and Rosemary Myrdal won the governorship and lieutenant governorship. It was only the second time over the previous 32 years that a
Wow.
Republican had won.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how rare it was. And he made it cool to be a Republican. And now, all these years later, in just 6 years ago, I defeated the last standing statewide elected Democrat in the state, and we've come a long way, and we did it over increments. But it all began with Ed Schaefer when I was a young party leader. And what motivated me, Jonathan, in '92 to even become party chairman, was just a sense of frustration. I lived in Bismarck at the time, working for the state party, the Republican Party of North Dakota, and I used to walk around the Capitol grounds every evening. And I'd walk by the governor's residence, and I just kept saying to myself, "It doesn't belong to them.
Wow.
It doesn't belong to them. They're not entitled to this."
Right.
Now, I will tell you, Jonathan, I still do the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not entitled to this job. None of us are entitled to this job. I remember when none of us had these jobs. These are offices that belong to the people of North Dakota, and we occupy them for a time, but we have to re-earn them every time there's another election.
So part of the reason why you jump in is because you're frustrated with the way things are going. It
Mhm.
seems like that's a constant theme why people get into politics, even nowadays.
Yeah.
And you see Republicans getting involved in North Dakota, which is heavily Republican state, heavily red state,
It
and
is
they're
now.
getting in because they're frustrated with it. Have you
Mhm.
seen since '92, since all the way back then? Have you
Yeah.
seen a change in what the party even believes in and where it stands, maybe on issues that may be alarming or you think is headed in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think conservatism, liberalism, moderation, wherever you sort of land in the spectrum of ideologies, I think it ebbs and flows constantly.
Right.
But within that ebb and that flow, there are certain principles, and I think the Republican Party today, largely believes and is where it's always been. But the pendulum swings a little further one way or another depending on circumstances. I think for the North Dakota Republican Party, for Republicans in North Dakota. And so when I say the North Dakota Republican Party, Jonathan, by the way, I don't mean the 50 people that are on the state committee, or the
Yeah.
dozen that are on the executive committee, or for that matter, even the maybe, I don't know, 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 that go to a convention at any given time. I'm talking about the roughly 200,000 people who vote Republican
Right.
for the most part. And that's a really big tent. And that
Yep.
term "big tent" was coined by Lee Atwater, who was a mentor of mine, was a Republican National Chairman, Republican National Chairman, after George Bush was elected, George Herbert Walker Bush. That's when I was on the committee. Was when during that reelection
Right.
for him in '92. So I knew Lee. He died very young of brain cancer, but he was very aggressive. And
Mm-hmm.
he always said, "Hey, we've got to be a big tent." He understood that you can only win by addition. But even within that, there's a variety of beliefs within in that basic core belief. And our tent in the Republican Party in North Dakota has gotten very large, largely because we've had tremendous success because of these basic conservative principles that are so attractive to people. And for so long, much like in the United States, North Dakota had only seen one form of governing, and it was very liberal.
Right.
And now they're only seeing one form of government, which is more center right. So that leaves a lot of room. The
Yeah.
problem is the only people can have to argue with is ourselves, because we've been so successful in getting rid of Democrats
Right.
that it looks like we're always having a civil war, when the reality is I think we're always having family discussion.
Right. And there should be room for those discussions to happen. It doesn't always have to be a civil war. You
That's
were
right.
there at the convention, not this last convention, but a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
ago when
Mm-hmm.
the discussion got very intense, and there was a chair that was trying to be de-seated for that convention. You had to go and
Mm-hmm.
try to settle tensions down. Is this uprising, whatever discussion? We'll stick to discussion. Uprising would be more
Sure.
fun to talk about, but
Uprising's fun. I can go with
yeah,
uprising, Jonathan. That's
but
good.
this discussion, intense discussion that happens within the Republican Party, is this something that you have concern about? Or I understand that there's times where it's a good thing, but I'm talking about in longevity
Mhm.
because this is happening for few years now, and who knows what will
Yeah,
happen into the future. Is it
yeah,
something that should be
yeah.
concerning if it goes on for many years?
Yeah, it's a good point. It doesn't concern me yet. I mean, at least not, it doesn't concern me, to any great degree, I should say. Maybe that's
Right.
a better way to put it. Because at the end of the day, these couple 100,000 Republicans who vote, maybe 100, 150,000 of them vote in a Republican primary. At the end of the day, they have their say. And that's the beauty of our system. While on the one hand, you have this apparatus, this leadership group, this corporation, if you will, that's the North Dakota Republican Party. You still have this great tradition of self-governance where the people choose even who their Republican candidates are, not just who wins on general election day, but who their candidates are. And there's a tremendous balancing there.
Right.
I actually am quite heartened by the activism that we see today. You might recall, I'm the first Republican in North Dakota history to not come to not go to the Republican state convention, which is what I did in 2012, not go to the Republican state convention, rather seek my nomination from the voters. And even back in 1992, when I was a state party chairman, I floated the idea of having a post primary convention because we just weren't adding, we were subtracting all the time. We were more of a club, almost like a country club, than we were a party representing the vast majority of Republicans in the state. And so in 2012, when I defeated the nominated candidate, I became the first Republican to do that. The next one was Doug Burgum,
Right.
interestingly. And now it's been, it's become a bit of a thing, right? So, but that's how most states do it. It seems unusual to us, or it did at the time. This is how it's done in most states. But what really motivated me in 2012, it wasn't just my own experiences watching as people like Ron Paul supporters, in the 2012 election cycle. Ron Paul finished second in the North Dakota Republican caucuses for president.
Okay.
Rick Santorum, who I was his state chairman in North Dakota, very conservative, pro-life, former senator from Pennsylvania, a good friend of mine. He finished first. It was Mitt Romney who finished third, and yet it was sort of establishment Republicans that were so concerned that somebody that supported Mitt Romney or Rick Santorum would become a delegate to the national convention that they turned the microphones off when their supporters tried to get put on the ballot for Republican National Convention delegates. And that was more concerning to me, quite honestly, than anything I've seen since.
Right.
And so I've always been the person that sort of defended the rights of people on all sides. Even this year, I have given lots of money, my political action committee money, to multiple candidates in the same legislative districts who aren't even really running together, but they're all Republicans,
Wow.
because I want to keep that tent really big and full. I agree with some of them some of the time, and other ones some of the time, maybe none of them all of the time, much like they feel about me.
Yeah.
But we still fit into this center right tent that is far better for the people of North Dakota than anything on the left.
So you are the one that started this deal where the convention doesn't matter who they elect, because
I'm the first one.
you're
Yeah.
the first one, and I
Yeah.
tease the way that I say that, but does this mean, and this isn't necessarily on the topics that I was anticipating to go into today,
Sure.
but does this mean that maybe the convention should be redone in North Dakota? You already mentioned perhaps having it later.
Yeah, I think so. But I've thought that for about 3 decades. So this isn't a new thought
Yeah.
for me. I think so. And here's one of the things, Jonathan, that as North Dakotans, it's another one of those things. It's hard for us almost to wrap our arms around, but we're the only state in the country that does not have voter registration.
Hmm.
Every other state in the country requires you to register as a Republican or as a Democrat prior to voting in a primary. And there's something to be said for that declaration.
Right.
There's something to be said. It's a little bit like when the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans, if you know that if you confess that Jesus is Lord, that there's something about the confession that
Yeah.
has power to it. And I kind of think that way about politics, that saying or writing, even if you're lying, if you're registering as a Republican or registering as a Democrat, there's some risk in that, and I think
Right.
it's noble to do that. So because of that, I really do feel like we're at a little bit of a handicap in this regard. But I've always thought that having more people making that fundamental decision actually enhances the participation, if you will, in choosing the candidate, and I think that's better for the party.
Yeah. So North Dakota politics is interesting, um, especially this year where we've had a ton of change. Kelly
Yeah.
Armstrong felt the need to step out of the federal race, jump into the
Mhm.
governor race. Of course, Brigham led the way in all that change. We know the story.
Sure.
Um, Probably one of the biggest things, though, in all that was the change in the chairs of the Republican Party. Do you feel, and
Hmm.
I've asked a lot of people this question, do you feel
Hmm.
like right now there's some instability in the Republican Party in North Dakota? Not talking about all the discussions that are happening, but I'm
Hmm.
talking about actual change in positions that are happening that might be giving an opportunity for the Democrats to finally get back into one of those prime seats in North Dakota.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's a really important thing to ponder. I would say, you might be able to say, well, yeah, it's concerning, it's a little unstable, except for one thing: the other side are Democrats, and they have nothing. I mean, they I hate to say it this way, but they really are a dysfunctional uh, political party. Partly because their national party is so far removed from the reality of the
Right,
central part of the country. When you look from North Dakota down to Texas, every state from there to from North Dakota to Texas is all has all Republican senators, Republican governors, and largely Republican House members. Um, and so it's really tough being a Democrat today in our state and in other
right,
states like ours. So there's that. But make no mistake, if we become complacent or if we get too unstable, to use your terms, yeah, I think you can wake up one day, the day after an election, and go, I didn't see that coming. How
right,
did that happen? And if we're not careful, that can happen. That's why the thing I remind Republicans of all the time when I speak, whether it's at a district event, and I do a lot of them, or the state convention, I remind them these are not our offices. We're not entitled to them. We're not certain to get them. And anybody that thinks so is a lot younger than me, because I remember when it wasn't even cool to be a Republican, much less a route to success.
right.
So, but do I worry about the instability at the party leadership level? I really do not. This is why we have elections every 2 years. It's why we reorganize our districts every 2 years. You see trends that happen, and then you see them, bounce back a little bit. Um, I'd rather be us than them. I'd rather have a vibrant party that disagrees across the spectrum than one that follows along like sheep. I don't think that's very attractive, and I don't think it's very good governance. But so I'm not overly worried about that. I'd rather see us get along than fight, but I also don't mind a good contest.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask one more question on this and then we'll get to more
Sure.
interesting things. But you
Yeah, that's
mentioned
pretty interesting.
that
Yeah.
the Democrats, it's difficult to be a Democrat in North Dakota because of where
Hmm.
the national party is headed. It I don't
Hmm.
think if you look at history, I don't think it was always that way. And specifically, I go
No.
back to around 92. I feel like there began to be change following 92. And the reason why I pinpoint 92 is because
Hmm.
of Clinton and some of the changes that he made after he got into office. One of the common
Hmm.
ones is abortion, where his stance on
Hmm.
abortion changed. And it seems like now, if you're going to be in the Democrat Party, you cannot be against abortion at all, whereas there used to be a place for you. So
Yeah.
combining that
Yeah.
with a bigger tent that the Republicans are holding, does that leave the possibility where there's people that weren't always a Republican, but they're still probably hate the idea of being a Republican, but they just fit in a little bit more. And does that kind of create some uneasiness?
Yeah. Yeah, boy, you really put your finger on something there. I'm going to go back again a little bit and just give you this one. When I was the party chairman in 1992, and there are a few people still alive that will remember this, but and there's a whole bunch of there are a bunch of editorials to prove it. I appointed a pro-life and a pro-choice co-chairs of the
Okay.
platform committee or the resolutions committee. And the reason I did that is because we were always losing, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure that pro-choice Republicans felt comfortable in
Okay.
our party. Now, we're a pro-life party. The
Right.
resolution was overwhelmingly pro-life, but I wanted to make sure that pro-choice Republicans knew they had a place at our table, and I wanted us to listen to them. Um, and and the headlines in the Fargo Forum were Cramer plays with fire over abortion. The day after the election, the headlines were Cramer stuffs abortion genie back in the bottle, and 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 I just think this is sort of my style, as you can probably tell. I'm a pretty accommodating person. I know what I believe,
Right.
and I'll fight like hell for it. But I think we have to be able to listen and make room for people who don't think exactly like us. So if there's that person that's uncomfortable in the Democratic Party, and maybe, and let's take some liberties here. I will. You might be a pro-life Catholic. In fact, you might be a really pro-life Catholic, but you're also sort of a pro-social justice Catholic. That same faith drives you to both of those conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to find a place if you're going to be politically active. And you might say, I don't know. I just can't deal with the abortion thing. So I'm going to go over and be a Republican. But then you might go, I don't know. I feel like they're a little hard on immigrants coming into the country or whatever the case might be. And I just think as people, both of faith and of self-governance, we have to be a little more open to each other, again, still being persuasive with what your convictions are, but also attuned to what other people's might be and what might motivate them. And I think that is a function of leadership. It's a function of having those open arms within the context of the guardrails of fundamental conservatism. And some people do that better than others. I think the biggest challenge, Jonathan, for us is that society today, the lines between the two philosophies have become so bright, and the
Right.
distance from one another has become so great that it's harder and harder to bridge that. And I think a lot of people, in fact, I'm sure most people, when you look at who won, some of the people that won the party endorsement at the convention this year, who finished second or third
Right.
in the primary, that tells you there's a little bit of disconnect right now, and we've got to find a way to bridge that and make sure that people feel welcome into the tent and don't just show up on primary day to vote,
Right.
because again, there's a disconnect.
Absolutely. It does feel like there's a disconnect in some of those areas. One thing that can be said about you, and that you kind of alluded to already, is that you're very active in North Dakota still. You didn't go to now. There's probably people on the other side that won't agree with that. Okay, but there's always gonna be
Sure,
that. But I've
sure.
seen your name around at a lot of different um, local people that are running for office, and you've been
Mm-hmm.
involved. Why is that important to you? You made it to the big leagues. You're there. Why is it important for you to stay close to your roots?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think part of it, Jonathan, is um, the way I was raised. My mom had a high school education. My dad had an 11th grade education. Um, Both of them were very blue collar my whole life. My dad, like I said, rural electric lineman. My mom pumped gas at the local Cenex station, worked in nursing homes, cleaned homes for people around kindred. Um, None of us ever thought that we were less than anybody else because of it. And I just think that's a big part of it. My wife, Chris, if if the Holy Spirit can't keep me humble, Chris will. So I come home, every week. I can't wait to get here. It's the first thing I want to do. My 6 grandchildren are as precious to me as anything in the world. My own children, my own struggles, and my own family.
Right.
All of that is. I would even say, gosh, I hope this doesn't hurt my reelection chances, but being a United States senator isn't like in the top 10 things that I am.
Okay.
really.
Wow.
And I say that just because, gosh, there's so many other more important things. And by
Right.
the way, I've never thought that there aren't other people who could replace me.
Yeah.
I always say if I die in the United States Senate, it'll be because a tour bus hit me on Constitution Avenue.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine staying there forever. I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is I've been very disciplined about some of the things you talked about, but particularly, I like media. As I
Hmm.
said, I talk to all the reporters in Washington, just like I talk to all the reporters in North Dakota. They all have my cell number. I do 2 hours of talk radio a week in North Dakota on individual stations around the state. And it allows me to stay really super connected. And it allows people to hear from me, but it also allows me to hear from people. I think that's a big part of it.
Right.
But I think the other really big thing is I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
I love North Dakota.
That's
I
good.
like going to the events in Fargo and Killdeer and Dickinson and Williston and Grand Forks. I really truly do, and so it's just joy for me.
Right. You mentioned you enjoy the media, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
pull a tweet that you made,
Okay.
in August, where and I liked the tweet. Haters will hate, the ignorant will write columns, and soccer players will have fun. That's part of what the tweet
Yeah.
said, on August
Yeah.
16th. Um, so is that just a fun jab at the media? I know that there was some things that were being said that were pretty strong by certain media members,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, yeah. That was, I guess it was a jab at the media, but it was a jab particularly at Rob Port, who's,
okay,
as you know, very opinionated podcaster. I do his show a lot. I
okay,
mean, I used to do it every week or every
gotcha,
other week. We had a regular schedule.
yeah,
I like Rob. I'd consider him a friend. He thinks about a lot of things. Obviously, he has a lot of strong opinions. He's very, very creative writer,
yeah,
but he was really wrong going after this one event. In fact, I didn't even understand it, to be
yeah,
honest with you. I didn't understand his what he was pointing at, because he was first of all sort of attacking a friend of mine that I
right,
care a lot about, Jared Hendricks, somebody whose campaign I support, and I support Steve Swantek's campaign, the other Republican in that
gotcha,
district. I want them both to win. I want
yeah,
them both to really win big.
right,
Um, but Rob was going after him for, of all things, participating in a multicultural, or really helping headline a multicultural soccer event. I don't know if it was a jamboree or a tournament or just a lot of fun, but
right,
all these soccer teams, and these soccer teams representing different nationalities and ethnicities and home countries. And there was and there were a couple of media sources in here, but then not just making fun of it, but somehow making fun of Jared because like he was somehow, I don't know what, racist. Or
right,
I just think these people didn't understand or don't understand, first of all, the game of football,
yeah,
of soccer
yep,
style
yep,
football. I do. I have a son that plays a very high level
okay,
football in England right now. He's in Liverpool,
very
Abel,
neat,
and plays. He's 17, playing with 23-year-olds
wow,
on a soccer team in Liverpool.
incredible,
And I've been around. I'm a member. I'm a co-chairman of the Senate Soccer Caucus. Giovanni, the president of FIFA, I've met.
wow,
Getting ready for the World Cup in 2026.
yeah,
So he's connecting with us. And you think about things like the Olympics or the World Cup and other international games. It's one of the most unifying things in the world. I mean, really, soccer is one of the most unifying things in the world.
hmm,
And if you've got a bunch of Somalians in Fargo calling themselves this, Somalia FC, that's Somalia Football Club. It's a very normal, common name. And somebody made fun of them or made light of them because they called their team Somalia FC. I'm
yeah,
like, that's as normal as sunrise,
right, yeah,
if you're in the
exactly,
football business. So I was a little bit irritated, but it did give me an opportunity, Jonathan, as you pointed out. I sometimes will jab that way, and it's sort of a satirical way.
yeah,
um and I like satire. It goes over a lot of people's heads. Sometimes you got to be careful with it. Some people take it literally,
right.
but usually the people you're aiming it at know who you're talking
That's the
to.
truth. That's the
and
truth.
and that's kind of what I did with that tweet. Is I wanted to make the point, 2 points. I wanted to give the little jab, but more important to me in that tweet than anything was that my friend Jared Hendricks knew that I had his back. That's what that's about. I'm going to get emotional. That's the bottom line. Is I just want him to know that I have his back because I understand what he's doing and I applaud it.
Absolutely. Did you think when you got into politics in the early 90s, late 80s that you'd be talking about tweets?
Well, I sure didn't
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm not even a bird watcher, so no, I would never have known that. However, what a tool it can be, what a tool or what a weapon it can be,
Yeah,
depending on your
absolutely.
outcome, right, or your outlook.
So a couple other things that are happening in North Dakota that we've seen over the past few years is term limits and age limits. Interesting
Mm-hmm.
things. Conservative
Mm-hmm.
state typically
Mm-hmm.
want the voters to have as much control as they can, and then there's
Yeah.
this restriction that's put in place. Do you think this is going to be a good thing for North Dakota in the future? Obviously, it doesn't affect your position at the federal level, but is it going to be a good thing looking forward in North Dakota?
Well, I don't know if it'll be a good thing or a bad thing, but I do think it's a peculiar thing. Because to your point about restrictions, see, I have always believed strongly in self governance
Mm-hmm.
and why we would voluntarily restrict our choices on at the ballot box. I cannot understand. I understand why it's popular at sort of a shallow level.
Yeah.
People are frustrated, right?
Right.
They're frustrated, but if you're frustrated, just remember the people that are elected to office are a reflection of the people who vote for them and who support them. And there are some advantages to incumbency. There are some advantages to seniority that maybe seem unfair, and probably we can work on those. Jonathan, I think that's fair. But I think restricting your own choices. Here's what I think. I think people will come to regret it and they'll correct it.
Okay.
And so again, it gets back to this moment we're in. People feel a certain way, and they're compelled, and through their frustration, they've decided, hey, we don't want these old farts to hang around any longer. And but you're already hearing some people who are proponents of that, which makes no sense if you're a conservative, but it does if you're frustrated,
Yeah.
who are already going, that guy's already going to have to not run again so
Right.
quickly.
Right.
And I think they'll correct course. That's the greatness of our system,
Yeah.
that we can correct our own mistakes.
And this ties into a deal which is even one of the measures in North Dakota, and we're talking a lot specific North Dakota politics, I guess, right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's okay.
we'll switch the page here soon, but about how strict or how lenient it is right now. It's very easy, relatively easy, to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and of course,
Yeah.
one of the measures that will be on the ballot in November will be potentially tightening that up, which is also interesting. But the problem isn't that, because we have the property tax measure that's coming up, and that was done whether you agree with it or not. That was done
Mm-hmm.
how it was intended to be. It was
Mm-hmm.
grassroots. People have passion about an issue. They get signatures. They get it on the ballot, and there's an opportunity for action to be taken or people to say no, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part is when you have some, and I would have to go look even further, but some outside money, outside interest groups that target North Dakota because of lenient standards with the constitutional amendments and say, hey, this is an opportunity for us to get our. Is that concerning at all with how our constitutional amendments are set up in North Dakota and how those measures can get on the ballot?
Yeah, it is a little bit because the ease with which you get these things on the ballot, initiated measures, particularly constitutional ones, initiated measures, or to to oppose a bill is a little easier, as I recall. Constitutional being the most stringent, as it should be, but all of them are fairly easy, to your point. And they're so easy that it is easy, really easy, for an outside group that has a lot of money to come in and buy an election.
Right.
And that does concern me a little bit. But at the same time, we're a little state where in some election cycles, depending on whether it's a presidential year or not, whether it's a primary or general, where you get these measures, on, and that's all part of the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
We're North Dakotans are very well informed.
Right.
They really are, and to the degree they don't know something, it's fairly easy for them to find out. It's quite easy for them to find out
Mm-hmm.
what they need to know. So I don't fret about it. I do think that it could be tightened up a little bit, a little bit of a higher bar set, um, so that you don't have somebody coming in with a bunch of money and buying a successful election, if you will, for an initiated constitutional amendment. Because the reason outside groups do that is, first of all, it's inexpensive. It's a low bar to get there, and then it can create momentum
Right.
for a larger trend, right? That's
Right.
why they do it. I don't like to see that sort of thing on the one hand. On the other hand, we've fought back much of the time with far fewer resources than were being spent
Yeah.
against something that we may disagree with, and have been successful. Occasionally, you're going to lose one of those or two of those. Um, North Dakotans inherently really don't like outsiders
No.
doing our politics for us, right? So um, while it happens, I don't worry a lot about it. I would just say, for people that disagree with something that's being put on a ballot by an outside group, go get your own group.
Yeah. Right.
It's
Yeah.
really pretty easy to be active. I don't like lazy politics. I don't like lazy elections.
Right.
I think you have to work for it every time, and that's the same for an initiated measure as it is for a candidate.
So we have a special segment that we do on these, and
Okay.
we break out sometimes, and it's rapid fire. We ask
Okay.
you a bunch of controversial questions that
Uh-oh.
can make or break your election, rapid fire style.
Okay. Okay.
You ready?
Sure.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee all the
Coffee.
way.
Favorite North Dakota season, summer or winter? There's only two, right?
Well, that's summer for sure.
Yeah, and people will not like me saying there's only two. What's your go-to comfort food? It's been a long day in Washington. What are we looking for?
Long day in Washington, probably just a walk around the Capitol Mall. Quite
Okay.
honestly,
Yeah.
If I need to eat, I go to the Capitol Hill Club.
Okay.
If I want some gumbo, they have some
Gotcha.
really good gumbo at the Capitol Hill Club.
There you go. There you go. Are you an early bird or night owl?
Very early. My alarm goes off at 4:40 a.m. in
Yeah.
Washington. I'm in the house gym by 5 o'clock. Yes, I work out in the house gym. It's closer and it's better. So I'm a very early riser.
Way to go. So, but you probably also have late nights. So I think the real question is, do you sleep?
Occasionally,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, occasionally, but I'm pretty disciplined about it. My latest night of the week is Tuesday nights, where a group of Republicans and Democrat House members and senators get together for fellowship in Jesus' name, and we just sort of hold each other up and hold each other accountable, and we dine together. That's the longest night I have of the
Okay.
week, and I'm still in bed, before 10 o'clock.
That's awesome. If you weren't in politics, what career would you have chosen? And you've probably already
Yeah.
alluded to it. But
Yeah. I would probably be in either a ministry vocation or academia.
okay.
I've been an adjunct professor at the University of Mary, and I really, really enjoy that.
Favorite book?
My favorite book besides scripture is my 10th great grandfather's journals, which have been put into a 2-volume book called A Plymouth Plantation.
Okay.
I've read it a couple of times. I journal it myself as I read his journals.
Yeah.
He writes about the pre getting on the Mayflower till he gets to to the new country, and then his first several years as governor of Plymouth Colony. It's really quite touching for me.
It's very neat. So if you could go back and have dinner with any historical figure besides Jesus, who would it be?
Yeah. Well, for me, it probably would be Martin Luther,
Okay.
although the Apostle Paul would be
Okay.
way up there
Dude,
as well.
a discussion with Apostle Paul would be very interesting.
Wouldn't it?
Uh,
Yeah. Well, you just have to listen because he'd shred you to pieces if you're having a theological debate with him.
You are right. What's a hidden talent you have sorry, let me re-ask this. What's a hidden talent that you have that most people don't know about?
Well, I don't like to talk about it, but I'm Batman.
There you go.
I no, I think yeah, I mean I don't know if a hidden talent. I don't really have many talents, quite honestly. I'd say public speaking, except that
Yeah.
most people probably know that about me.
Right.
But yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm a pretty good Batman, quite honestly. I do have a costume.
I think being in the gym by 5 a.m. is pretty good talent that's probably mostly hidden as well. That takes some
Yeah,
dedication.
I suppose.
We'll end with this. Typically, we ask people what's the best thing in North Dakota, and everyone says the people. So I'm going to switch it up on you.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you, if we rolled back the clock and I ran into an 18-year-old Kevin Cramer, who would I meet?
Yeah.
Who would I be meeting?
Yeah, so you'd be meeting a future tourism director
Yeah.
because I did become tourism director, and it was the most fun I've ever had at work still. And if
Okay.
in my retirement, if I could go back and be tourism
There you
director, I
go.
probably would, because have always loved North Dakota. I just have always been a big champion cheerleader for North Dakota because it's a beautiful place and it's rich in history, great people to your point, obviously, spectacular, rich natural resources, and I just love the prairies. I love the prairies and the prairie sky.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for partaking in that round. It's always interesting. Obviously,
It's
we've
always a pleasure.
talked a lot about the state. Let's spend the last minutes that we have together talking
Hmm.
about federal. A lot of stuff going on at this level. As you go and enter potentially this race, you're in this race, but as you enter potentially another
Hmm.
term, what are some of the
Hmm.
top legislative priorities that you're kind of seeing should be on the radar, especially involving North Dakota?
Yeah. So great question. And when I think about things that involve North Dakota, first of all, in the short run, we have to get a farm bill done.
Right.
That's critical for North Dakota. We have to have a contemporary farm bill that recognizes that Biden inflation has added tremendously to the input costs and the harvest costs and everything of agriculture. And we have to have a safety net that reflects that if we're going to continue to feed a hungry world. Certainly, energy policy, um, simplifying simplifying regulations, streamlining permitting and regulations for everything from oil and gas to wind farms and pipelines, and transmission lines. We've got to do it, but we've got to do it right. Those two things alone are incredibly important to America's national and economic security, as well as to North Dakota's economy and standard of living. The other thing I would focus in on is, and along those lines, really is the rest of economic of the economy, reducing regulations not just on energy but on agriculture, on manufacturing, on technology. We are burdening our entrepreneurs with roadblocks that have really hampered innovation, even by comparison to the way it used to be just unleashed. And I think those are big time national security and geopolitical issues. Strengthen the dollar. They seem like simple things, but they're not. They're really big things. Clearly, securing our border is important to every state.
Right.
Every state's a border state. We can go through all of that, but there's no question we've got to secure our border. I mean, we just learned today that that in the United States there are like with 300,000 of the illegal immigrants that have come across the border in the last 4 years are convicted murderers.
Wow.
300,000 of
That's
them,
a
and it's
ton.
like 400,000 or 500,000 are convicted sex offenders.
Wow.
And so this, and then you got the fentanyl and all that. It's just awful. So I think we've got to do that. But then the last thing I'd say, we've got to rebuild our military right now. We'd be hard pressed to fight one, much less two wars at the same time. If China and Russia, both got active at the same time, we'd be in a lot of trouble. And we've taken a peace dividend for these last 40 years or so, since Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul, beat down the Soviet Union with this huge deterrent. We've really taken a break, and our adversaries have continued to build their militaries, advance them tremendously technologically. When I think of things that I've done, in the Senate, the one that stands out for me is one of the most important was to create and stand up a space force, because
Right.
we were losing the space race. And so, um, and that's really important to North Dakota because we have these really important Air Force bases, nuclear base, and of course a Space Force base now, and a space development base at Grand Forks. So we're really important to that. I don't do that for the Chamber of Commerce in North Dakota, in North Dakota cities. I do that for the national security and the cause of freedom around the world. We just so happen as North Dakota to be, sort of ground zero for a lot of the modernization of our military that's critical to America's peace in the future.
Yeah. So you mentioned rebuild military, and it's interesting because our debt payments as a country are going to be
Mhm.
surpassing the amount of money that we're putting into
Yes.
our military, which is sad.
Yep, that's right. It's
It's
that.
concerning. Yet we give more money to the fight in Ukraine. We give more money to Israel, and people. Some will say that we should be doing those things, and some would say that we
Hmm.
shouldn't. What's kind of the baseline, the principle that you work off when
Yeah.
you're looking at giving some of that foreign aid, even when
Hmm.
stateside we're going pretty far into
Hmm.
debt now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great question. So, what I look at, what's sort of the factors that I look at is the first question is what is this in America's interest? And I would say that Ukraine winning the war against Russia is definitely in the United States' interest because if they lose, um, we will first of all we will be in breach if we didn't do enough to help them. We'll be in breach of our own contract with them. It
Gotcha.
means that we didn't back them when we were required to by law, by international laws that we signed, by the way. But beyond that, Vladimir Putin may not stop there. In fact, almost certainly won't stop there, and you eventually get into a NATO fight where we're obligated. Then it's a lot more expensive to fight Russia than it is to support Ukraine, keeping Russia at bay. So to me, that's the factor. Now that may change by tomorrow. That may
Right.
change in a month or two. So it's a constant. You've always got to be calculating. Same is true with Israel. Now Israel's a little bit different, as I always tell my friends in Israel. Um, if I didn't support Israel, my mother would come out of the grave and primary me.
Right. Right.
It's that important theologically and that important as a national security as well. There are only 100% friend in the Middle East. They're certainly our most important friend in the Middle East. They're a very important trading partner, intellectual and technological partner. So we have to support them because that is in America's best interest, and it's not even all that expensive to support them. But the nice thing is that we our own national defense benefits from it because you're seeing a regrowth of our industry, defense industry base here that allows us to be better prepared to defend our own shores, which we're not adequately prepared for right now. That said, all of this can be done better, Jonathan, in my
Okay.
view, and this is where I really hang out. We have friends, we have enemies, and we have frenemies.
Mhm.
We need to know who's who. We need to do more with our friends. We need to both expect and encourage them to do more for themselves. We're seeing that in Japan, where they now are doubling their own national security budgets. We're seeing that throughout Europe and throughout NATO. Thank you, Donald Trump, for kickstarting that effort. We can do. We need to make sure that as an alliance, as allies, 1+1 equals more than two, and 1+1+1+1 equals more than four. There really is a dynamism, but you've got to, instead of doing things for these other countries, you need to get them to do things with us. And that's where I spend a lot of my time, particularly with Australia and the United Kingdom. I'm, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, and I'm actually co-chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee. So when it comes to building ships, building submarines, things like that, um, we just need to do a lot more with our allies so that we can enjoy each other's success rather than do things in silos, which is what we've been doing for far too long. And then know who our adversaries are and make sure
Right.
we're not helping them. We shouldn't be helping China. We shouldn't be helping Russia. We shouldn't be helping Venezuela. We need to, we need to know who's who. And then with our frenemies, sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're enemies, sometimes it's situational. Turkey's a good example. There's a country that's a NATO country, but we're just now trying to sort of fine tune some things related to their missile defense system. That's a Russian system, while they want our F-35s, which are obviously our American fighter jets.
Yeah.
These are things we have to work through in a diligent way, and make more friends out of frenemies. And that includes places like the UAE, Saudi Arabia. Donald Trump did a lot of that with Jordan and Morocco and other. There are just lots of ways we need to do this the right way. So I think a big part of that is our allies, and we need to have more friends and allies.
So going to budget and how that works through all the dynamics of national
Mm-hmm.
security, that's extremely important.
Yep.
Way more dynamic than probably even some everyday Americans realize. Um, Obviously, in the personal budget, and this is very small, but this is basically the stuff that's been talked about a lot this political cycle. I can't
Yeah.
go and help my friend if I'm going past my budget every single day. And so that's kind of what it feels like America is at, where
Mm-hmm.
we're going past our
Mm-hmm.
budget, but we're still trying to extend and help others. At what point do we say we just can't do it anymore and we begin to pull back to protect our own interests?
Well, we've been pulling back in some cases, but it is not without some risk, because when you every time we pull back from someplace, it becomes way more expensive when China swoops in, takes their minerals, takes their their ports, their airports, their communications, and they become a stronger enemy, and we're someday going to spend a lot more defending ourselves.
Right.
So everything has to be measured that way. But to your point, first thing we have to do is fix our budget process. I've been in Congress 12 years, and it's only gotten worse in terms of the process. And it's been the most awful the last 4 years with Chuck Schumer as majority leader of the Senate, where he doesn't bring up any appropriations bills as passed by the Appropriations Committee to the floor. Instead, he just bundles it all into a big omnibus spending bill at sometime around Christmas and says take it or leave it. And in there you have national defense, and you have agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
and you have transportation, and all these discretionary budget items. And until we deal with that process, that more create a more transparent process where you and everybody else in America can follow the process, see these bills one at a time instead of all at once, um, make members of Congress defend each one. Um, I think having the transparency actually forces a more conservative budget out of it. I think it also deals with reality in a much more transparent way. So people go, "What? Really? Is that really going to be in the budget?" I
Mm-hmm.
don't think so. That's not a very high priority. I think you just have to have the family discussion in a more granular way throughout the whole course of the year, which is why I've told every one of the people running for Republican leader in January, when we have a new Congress,
Right.
I want to see your calendar for the year. I want to see when we're going to take up each of the separate transport or appropriations bills, from transportation to agriculture to defense and military construction, veterans affairs, all of healthcare, all of these things. I think we could, by the way, I think the Supreme Court has handed us many gifts that allow us to find some real savings in the waters of the United States rule that took about 80 to 90% of the federal jurisdictional waters as per the EPA and the Corps of Engineers,
Okay.
and said, no, those are not waters of the United States. I think in North Dakota versus the EPA, where we prevailed, and they used major questions doctrine to overturn the Obama Clean Power Plan, where they said the absence of a prohibition is not a license for the bureaucracy to make up laws. And then in the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, which they said, no, agencies are not the experts that get to reconcile ambiguities in the law. That's up to the courts. Nobody elected the bureaucracy. They've really set the groundwork, from, in my view, in that they've reduced the workload tremendously of our bureaucracy. And I think we had to reduce the workforce commensurate with what the courts have done. I think we have a great opportunity to do that. And I also think we have to do more to grow our economy. So if cutting taxes, cutting regulations, um, unleashing the innovators, unleashing American energy and innovation, that's going to grow our economy. And the best way you can deal with budget deficits and debt
Right.
is to grow the economy.
Yeah.
But that, you can't stop there. You have to deal with the big drivers as well of debt and deficit. But they're tough decisions that require tough discussions, and way too many people don't want to talk about the tough things. I like to talk about the tough things. But when you do it with risk. My opponent in this election is already criticizing me for wanting to, quote, cut Social Security benefits for seniors,
Right.
raise the retirement age. In other words, she doesn't want to talk about any of these things. She just wants to pretend that somehow Social Security is always going to be there. And the reality is, it's not going to be there 10 years from now if we don't make some changes. So you got to have an honest, wide open discussion with the family at the family table.
So, omnibus bill. This is something that gets talked
Mm, mhm.
about a lot. What is the path
Yeah.
to getting rid of omnibus? Is there legislation that needs to happen, or is it simply just a new majority leader?
Yep, that's a great question. No, it really isn't legislation. The rules are easy. The rules of the Senate and the rules of the House are, there are 12 separate appropriations bills in 12 categories, as I sort of laid out
Right.
previously. Um, each one of them is its own. So there's this big appropriations committee. In the appropriations committee, there are 12 appropriations subcommittees.
Mm-hmm.
Each subcommittee deals with their own budget, right? They deal with, like I said, military construction VA, MILCON VA, it's called. That's one. National defense is one. Commerce and other things are one. Anyway, the education and healthcare are one.
Right.
Um, so there actually are 12. And so the way it's supposed to be done and the way it's designed to be done the only reason it's not done this way is because the majority leader who sets the floor schedule doesn't put them on the floor. So now that the Republicans are going to have a new leader because Mitch McConnell's not running for reelection,
Right.
we have the opportunity to leverage as individuals, whether there's 50 of us or 55 of us or 48 of us, but hopefully it's 55
Yeah.
or at least 51. We have the leverage now to force this issue because all you have to do is schedule it. Let's just say in May, the first week in May,
I
we're
see.
going to deal with military construction VA.
Yep.
The Appropriations Committee will do its work. That's not the problem.
Right.
You put that on the floor. And the reason it's tough in the Senate is because you can only do one thing at a time in the Senate. Once the floor is being used for this one issue,
Right.
you're going to spend a week or longer on it because everybody's going to bring their amendments right to the floor. That's what's special about the Senate. So it's going to take some discipline, but
Yep.
it's not does not require legislative change. The rules are already in place to do it the right way.
You mentioned your your competitor, the person that you're running against in this race, bringing up some things about spending, and something else that she is running, her campaign is running, is trying to find people that are voting for her, interested in voting for her, and voting for Trump. Is there worry that perhaps there's going to be a small blue wave this year, or do you see that the conservative principles that North Dakota has is going to hold strong?
It'll hold the conservative principles we have will hold strong. Nobody's voting for Donald Trump and my opponent, believe me. And if they are, it's because they're a Democrat voting for Trump.
Right.
In fact, the one person she uses as an ad is a very well-known Democrat. So in other words, her running that ad is just saying, look, there are even Democrats that aren't going to vote for Kamala Harris. They're voting for Donald Trump. And that doesn't gain her a single vote.
Right.
It just gains Donald Trump a vote. And that's really clear. No, that's a stunt like that. It's not only is it not going to work. I think it's bizarre. I think
Right.
it's actually diminishes her own credibility, to be honest with you.
So,
but there's no blue wave coming to North Dakota.
No. And so with some of these campaign tactics that are happening, and we saw a lot in the primary. In the primary, it was a lot of amidst the Republicans. Seen a little bit in the general. People call it the tactics that are used in Washington. Is there a little bit of some unethicalness that might be creeping into some of these campaign tactics with these ads that are running and stuff like that?
Well, I can't say that there's anything unethical about my opponent's ads. I mean, we have our opportunity to run our ads as well, and we are now, and we probably have $1.5 million or so worth of TV that's just started this week. I'm pretty, I'm pretty much a free spirit, as you can tell.
Yeah.
I'm pretty wide open door, open book. And I just think it's up to the opponent to clarify things if there are things, if they need to, if they feel the need to, or if they're concerned about it. You shouldn't be able to just outright lie. I think, you shouldn't be able to, use, take somebody's voice and make something that's not true out of their voice. I mean, there are some limitations that I think would cross an ethical line, but even things like that, I think it's up to the opponent to clarify. It gets a little dicier as you get really close to the election, where somebody might try to pull something at the last minute. I mean, I think about in the primary where somebody put out something that
the day of,
Julie Fedorchak, decided she's actually withdrawn from the race.
Right.
Therefore, you might as well not vote for her.
Yeah.
That's illegal. That's not
Too far.
okay. That's not just unethical. It's illegal. But we have a pretty wide, swath of openness when it comes to the First Amendment, freedom of expression, and we ought to protect it with everything that we can. I think, if anything, that the left is going too far in trying to suppress open, free political speech.
It's good.
So it's a little bit of a balance, but no, I'm not overly concerned about it in North Dakota at all. At least not from anything I've seen, even from my own opponent.
Last time you ran for election to Senate, it was against a well-known Democrat, Heidi Heitkamp. You won 55-45, somewhere right in there. This time around, why should conservatives of North Dakota, or North Dakotans in general, vote for Kevin Cramer?
Yeah, well, you should vote for me because you know me. You know that I'm an open book. You know that I'm transparent. You know that I'll tell you when I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you when I agree with you, and I'll tell you why. But more important, and probably the most important thing, is that you know me because I show up. I'm sort of stunned sometimes at how little some people show up who
Right.
choose a profession where showing up is perhaps the most important part of the job.
Yeah.
And I do it because I like it, but I know North Dakota. I know it really well. I know the people of North Dakota really well at an intimate level. It's one of the more enjoyable things, perhaps the most enjoyable thing about public life in North Dakota. I always say the most fun part of public life is the public,
Yeah.
and that's because that's what's so great about the Senate. That North Dakota has the same exact equal power in the United States Senate as California and Texas,
Right.
Florida, and New York, and everybody else. And that means that the people of North Dakota have disproportionate influence over the affairs of the country because they know me and I know them. Um, and so they know that I have their back, and I always count on the people of North Dakota to have mine when I deserve it, and
Right.
they'll hold me accountable when I deserve that. And I just think it comes down to more to that than it does to any one vote or number of votes. But I think maybe the biggest thing, everybody knows that I never give up when the bureaucracy goes against the people of North Dakota, whether it's you know a North Dakotan that's trapped in another country and
Hmm.
can't get home, or if it's a wetland that doesn't belong to the federal government, and a farmer's um, you know being abused by the EPA or the Corps of Engineers or the Fish and Wildlife Service or whatever it might be, or any number of other things. They know that I'm not going to stop until I get the justice that the North Dakotan deserves. And there are dozens of hundreds, maybe thousands of examples that most of which I couldn't point to directly because they're confidential.
Right.
But people do know that just like I did on the Senate floor this week, when the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is abusing the people of our nursing homes, uh, they're going to get a tongue lashing on the floor of the United States Senate, and they're going to get bipartisan letters, and bipartisan legislation to correct their behavior. Um, and I think one of the things, if I could say on my own behalf, one of the things I think that North Dakotans can relate to is that I'm fiercely Republican. I'm fiercely conservative. And in the same year that I received an award for having one of the most conservative voting records for keeping the government in check, the Defender of Limited Government Award, um, that same legislative session, which was the last one, I also received the Bipartisan Policy Council's Legislative Action Award. I'm the only one, the only
Mm.
Republican senator to receive that award last
Wow.
Congress at the same time as I received recognition for being conservative. I think there's something about that that's very North
Right.
Dakotan,
Yeah.
principled, but also pragmatic and want to get things done. Oh,
Absolutely.
there goes my camera.
Yeah. But really appreciate you jumping on today and taking time to talk about North Dakota and the federal side of things as well.
It's my pleasure to do it. Thank you for letting me.
Absolutely. And if people want to learn more about the campaign side, they can go to kevincramer.org.
There you go.
There we
That'll
go.
do it. KevinCramer.org, and then like me on all those things.
Sounds good. That
All the X and all the others, right?
X, Facebook, Instagram, looks like you have them all. So thank
I have at least those three.
yeah.
Truth Social too, but I don't
Truth.
do a lot on Truth Social.
Yeah.
I just read it.
Very good. Very good. Well,
All right.
again, thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, Jonathan. Bye bye.